In 2017, I released what a lot of people would call a YouTuber book. I've made videos on this channel since 2012, and off the back of this, I was offered a book deal, which was quite a common thing back in the mid-2010s. This is the book. It's called Feel Good 101. It is half autobiography, half advice book. I was giving life advice and talking about my amazingly long, epic life at the age of 25. I'm 34 this week, probably by the time you're watching this, so a lot's changed. In the last video, I asked if you guys wanted me to make a video answering your questions about the YouTuber book era, and a lot of you said yes. And before anybody says anything, I have made quite a few videos about this book in the past as well. You can find them all on this channel, all on my side channel that I used to have. I've talked about it a lot, but we can always milk it for another one, can't we? My book was quite the journey. Had a bit of controversy around it. And just before I get onto all of your questions, I just want to say this is not going to be a video where I'm just slagging off my book, slagging off the book industry. I'm not going to be slagging off my publisher or anything like that, but I'm going to be open, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to tell you how I feel about every aspect that you guys asked me about. So without further ado, let's talk about Feel Good 101. Were you approached to write the book, or was it something that you expressed interest in? So backstory is important. I will fully admit that I used to be one of the YouTubers that was very critical of YouTubers writing books. There was a wave of YouTuber books coming in like 2014, 2015. And in my opinion back then, a lot of them were just fucking garbage. I felt like a lot of them lacked substance. A lot didn't have anything to do with the YouTubers themselves, by which I mean like comic books and, you know, young adult novels by YouTubers that never expressed any interest in fiction or comics or anything like that, and I didn't really gel with that. We'd also just experienced the controversy of Zoe Sugg, and a lot of people love to shit on Zoella and Girl Online and the ghostwriting controversy that came with it. If you're looking for me to do that, I'm not going to do that. I have met Zoe. I like Zoe. Zoe is a good person. I know that shatters a lot of illusions. A lot of people like to think that YouTubers are very evil, very mean. Zoe isn't, okay? So we're not going to do that. But I was in the mindset that YouTube books were cash grabs and very asinine. I think I know what that word means. I should. I'm a fucking author. But all of this changed one day. I was with my sister, who was about 7 or 8 at the time. I think she was about 8. She's 18 now, so let that terrify all of you. I was in a shop with my sister called W.H. Smith, which sells magazines and books and stationery. It doesn't actually exist anymore. But I was with my sister, we were looking at the magazines, and she saw Zoella on the front of one of those magazines, and her face fucking lit up. She ran over to the magazine, she was like, Zoella! And my world just blew apart. I never disliked Zoe, as I said, but my sister's excitement, she was fucking 8 years old. Her excitement for seeing a YouTuber on the front of a magazine, it shifted everything that I thought, because for all of the drama and all the bullshit that people like to say about YouTubers, all the mainstream media hate campaigns that were going on, this was a YouTuber that was creating content and creating media that my sister enjoyed. It brought a smile to her face. And in that moment, I realized, you know what? YouTubers have this incredible influence. I know influencers are influencers, breaking fucking news, but to make young people happy, you know? And it just shattered everything for me. She'd not only heard of Zoe, she'd heard of Alfie, she'd heard of Dan and Phil. She knew that I made YouTube videos, but she knew all the UK YouTubers, and they made her happy. And I made a video about this on my second channel, just basically talking about how I've changed my mind about YouTuber books. I spent so long trashing them, but I said in that video, if they make people happy, I don't have a fucking problem with that. I think it was either the next day or the day after, I received an email. Seriously, I received an email from who would then be my publisher, and I think it was titled, So You Changed Your Mind on YouTuber Books. All off the back of that video, I received that email, and it was basically the publisher introducing themselves and saying, if you ever do want to work together, let's have a conversation. All based off of that honest video. At that time, I hadn't even thought that I was ever going to write a book, obviously. I didn't have any ideas to write a book. I never sat down and thought, if I was to write a book, what would it be about? So I guess you could say the answer is I was approached, but it was also because I was just talking about YouTuber books. It wasn't me, you know, deliberately making a video like, hey, wouldn't it be great if I wrote a book? It was nothing like that. I wasn't trying to put myself out there. It was a second channel where I was just being honest, and literally within a couple of days, I received that email. And I was like, maybe I should be a hypocrite and go back on everything I've been saying. I do remember being absolutely terrified before announcing that I was writing a book because of how vocal I'd been. I remember pretty much shitting myself the night before when I was announcing it. I was so prepared for so much backlash. Even though I'd explained everything and I'd explained how I changed my mind, I was so ready for people to be like, oh, well, you've been offered lots of money then. And I was surprised actually that that didn't really happen. People were just excited that I had changed my mind and that I had something to give. Was it always going to be an advice book, or was there potential to write something else? As soon as I got my head around the idea of maybe writing a book, I knew that it would have to be an advice book, not only because I was so up my own arse that I thought at 25 I knew the world and that I had lots of advice to give, but also because I still didn't want to write a book that was, you know, rubbish. I didn't want to write a book that was just like spot the difference in these pictures. I'd had an advice video series called Feel Good 101 for years. I think I started it in 2013 and it was called Feel Good 101. I can't remember if I was releasing them every week or every couple of weeks, but they started out as me in like 2013 against a white wall, just talking at you about how you should be confident and love yourself and bullies are mean. I always wanted to use what influence I had for good, believe it or not, and there was nothing else in my mind that I would have ever considered writing about. If I was going to write a book, I wanted it to help people, and I had my sister in mind, I had my young audience in mind. I'd been an only child until I was 16, so I was kind of navigating the world in my teens by myself, trial and error. So my idea was I wanted to write a book that I wish I had when I was growing up, and it turned into this. And I am still very proud of it. Obviously, what you know about the world at 25 versus what you know at 34, things change a little bit. I obviously felt like I was in a position where I knew enough about the world to tell all of you about it. And, you know, I have my mixed feelings about whether or not I should have done that now. But that's not to say that I'm not proud of this. I wrote every single word in this, which I'm sure we'll get onto in a sec. If you could go back, would you still write the book? I don't regret it. I don't regret it. The thing is, I can't go back. I can't go back to that moment in time. I can't go back to 2017. I can't be 25 again. I can't retroactively go back and assess my level of influence knowing what I know now. So it's kind of a cop-out answer, I suppose. I've heard countless times that pieces of this book have given people confidence and advice that they sorely needed. So if that's the case, I do not regret it at all. Were publishing companies treating YouTuber books as a cash grab or genuinely engaged? I can't speak for every publisher, I suppose. And to be fair, I can't really speak for my publisher. I can speak from my experience. I had a good understanding team. I worked closely with my editor, Hannah. That's not to say that any part of it was rewritten or, you know, ghostwritten at all. I wrote every single fucking word. When people hear the word editor, they think, oh, okay, all right, I see you. That's not the case. When you have a book deal, and it's basically a book being crafted from start to finish, rather than, you know, having written a book and then trying to find publisher for it, it is good to have a team that is helping you every step of the way in terms of, like, you know, giving helpful advice, answering questions, helping with like how do these books get structured, things like that. Was the level of communication I had absolutely perfect? No, but in what world is anything perfect? I'd never written a book before and I ended up writing a book that I was very proud of. So I would say that my publisher was genuinely engaged in helping me write a book that would help people and would be what would be classed as a good book, regardless of whether it's a YouTuber book or not. In terms of cash grab, it's a weird one to answer because they're a business. Publishers, like any business, they want to make money. There was one certain decision that I did try and fight back on and did not win. So, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Actually, I think there were two actually. Yeah, but just like everything, I mean, they marketed the book. They wanted it to sell. I wanted it to sell. I wanted it to get in the hands of people that needed it, whether they knew who I was or not. So, is the book still on sale? I think you can still find it somewhere. You won't find it on any shelves in bookstores, like physically anymore, but I think you can still get it online. I think there's still some booksellers that sell it. Otherwise, you can get it from somewhere else. You know, you can find it. So, technically, yeah, I suppose so. What was the hardest part about writing the book? Maybe a specific chapter. I'll be honest, I haven't gone back and reread this. Like, well, when you write a book and when you rewrite the book and rewrite the book, you know, first, second, third draft, you've kind of read it, you know. When you've written like 70,000 words or however many it was, you know, you've kind of read it. So I actually have trouble remembering exactly everything I wrote in this book. There were certainly some parts that were harder to write than others. Yeah, it's not all sunshine and rainbows in this book, you know. There's a lot of talk about depression, bullying, peer pressure, things like that. I'd argue no matter where you come from, no one has like the perfect experience in life. You know, everyone has like hard times and challenges, and I wrote about a lot of them in here. There were some things that I had to sort of come back to. You know, I'd start writing and then go, I'm going to start writing the next section, actually. I'm going to come back to that one and come back to that one. But because I was very honest in this book, like, I'm not going to say like, you know, oh, the word just it flew out of me. But there's something about when you're just telling the absolute truth, you're just writing what you recall and how you felt. So what was the inspiration behind the cover? Now this is the thing I wanted to talk about. My initial idea was I didn't want to be on the cover of this book. I was very much against the idea of me being on it. I felt like the book was supposed to be more than, this is my opinion at the time, I wanted it to be bigger than myself. I knew it was a YouTuber book. I knew who I was, but I wanted it to be a book that could sit on the shelves, you know, for ages, not just like in the YouTuber young adult section, but like, you know, have a bit of staying power. I wanted it to just basically just say like Feel Good 101 on it. And this is one of the two things that publisher insisted on. They insisted that I was on the front. And that will come down to the fact that, you know, it helps to sell the book. If you've got the recognizable YouTuber on the front, it's going to draw your eye to it. I do remember trying to push for not my face, but ultimately that was a must for them. So, but pretty good compromise though. I'm not just standing there going, you know, it is me with a hand painted jacket that says Feel Good 101, and I'm not looking directly into the camera. So a good compromise that I was ultimately happy with. While we're here, the other thing that I didn't really like was the fact that the main title obviously is Feel Good 101. That's just what the book is actually called. But in the publishing world, when you have like an advice sort of thing, they insist on what they call a subtitle. So it's Feel Good 101, An Outsider's Guide to a Happier Life. I'll be honest, I can't remember if I came up with that or the publisher came up with it. I cannot remember. I think I came up with it, but I didn't want to have a subtitle. I felt like Feel Good 101 was definitive. It said everything that I wanted to say, but I guess from their perspective, if someone didn't know who I was, especially if I wasn't on the cover, like what does Feel Good 101 mean? To me, because it was my series on YouTube, I knew what it meant. But a lot of books, you'll notice, have that little subtitle on there that just gives a little bit more info. And that is something that I do wish wasn't there. I don't like it now. The Outsider's Guide to a Happier Life. Like, what a way to just put myself out there as I'm not like other people. You know, I was an outcast. I was on the outside. And also like a guide to a happier life. I mean, yeah, I guess that was the idea, you know, feel better about yourself. But who am I to write a guide to a happier life? I don't know. I will say though, every time I pick this book up, it is cool. I love the gold. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but the gold reflects the lightning bolts, and the little triangles. And obviously that is all I can't remember what they call that, but gloss? I can't remember. It's got a certain name to it, but it did stand out on the shelves. It was very fancy. I liked it a lot. And on the back, look at that little rainbow sort of reflection. I like that. I think that's cool. Also, unless you're from, I think, Australia, this only came in hardback. I might get around to explaining that in a bit. Who knows? Well, there are many rules what you're allowed to share or not. I was given full creative freedom. I think there was one time in one of my drafts where, I don't know, maybe it just got a little bit difficult in the writing process, but the book started to take more like a negative spin. Very, very fleeting, very temporary. I think it was like around like the depression sort of chapters. It's only one chapter. It wasn't just all about sadness, but I was given advice to maybe just rework the section. Nothing was changed by the editor at all, but there was like a little nudge like, are you okay? Basically. But I was sort of, advised to sort of, get back on track of like, giving it more of a positive spin, like more optimistic, for all like the negative things I was talking about in the book. Like, remember that this is about inspiring people and making people happy. And that was totally the correct decision. So if you want to call that like, editor interference or anything like that, go for it. I don't think it is at all. The only other thing that I was told, was that if I was going to be talking about real life experiences and real life people, the publisher either needed to get written permission from all of those people about their involvement, they needed to be sent everything that was written about them, or I had to make sure that there was nothing that you could like legally trace back to them. So by which I mean name changes. I changed the name of my boss. I changed the name of the girl that bullied me a lot in school, just because basically, even though I was talking about, my experiences, it was still from my point of view. It would have been a real like legal tangle to try and find all of these people, to send them the bits of the book way before it's released, obviously, to get their approval and things like that. So that's a common thing in the book world. The publisher wants to avoid defamation. I want to avoid defamation. I didn't say anything false. I want to make that very clear. I didn't make up fucking shit in that book. But for everyone involved, it was just best to keep things not vague, but just not traceable back to them. And also, I think that's the right decision looking back as well, to be honest. I know that if someone was to write about me being like a bitch to them or something, even if it was like for good, it might make you feel a bit rubbish, you know. So that's just a common thing in the industry. The only question I have about it is there a way I can buy a signed copy of it from you? The only reason I'm answering this is because there's like 2 or 3 of those. It's not because I'm like I'm not answering this to kiss my own ass. I don't even know if we did sign copies online. We might have done. It was a long time ago. My memory's not very good, which you could say makes me a very unreliable narrator in this. But we also did a book tour. I went around the different stores of a very, very well-known bookstore in the UK, signing copies, doing signing events and things like that. But as for now, not right now. The only way, really, is if you come to one of my shows. I'm also a musician. Please listen to my music. Please, thank you. If you come to a meet and greet, bring your book along and I will happily sign it. I'll sign my CDs, my vinyl, my book, anything. Well, as long as it's, not gross and still about me, I'll sign it. Yeah, that's the only way I can think that would work now. How do you avoid running out of things to write about? Well, there's a book about my life. If anything, I could have probably just kept on writing and writing, but you have to basically just keep it interesting, I kind of had the opposite problem, I think. There was no point in the writing process where I felt like I had to like drag it out. I wasn't looking for extra words. I wasn't like adding to the word count. It's all about structuring, basically. What I did from the start was, I started like a little structure guide for myself, like, how many chapters I wanted and what each chapter was going to be about, and then splitting those chapters into like different parts, like stories or different experiences. So I knew pretty much very, very early on into the process. It's when my ADHD really kicked in. I can be very organized when I've got hyperfixation, when I'm really passionate about something. I can meticulously plan it. You had nothing to say about Nerdcubed. Why? You seem like such good friends. Because not everything is about Nerdcubed. Fuck's sake. Maybe I should have done that. Demo 101, the chronicles of Nerdcubed and Emma Blackery. Demo. If I wrote a section about each single person that I know in my life, it would be a very, very weird book. Hey guys, here's some advice about school and bullying and depression. Anyway, here's Dan. What do you... Fuck's sake. The obsession continues. Stop it. What were some other alternative titles? It was always going to be called Feel Good 101. There was never going to be another title because I knew what I wanted to write. I knew what the book was going to be about. I knew it was going to be based off of my advice series. There was absolutely no other idea in my mind at all. Did the YouTubers write their own books or was there some help, i.e. how much ghostwriting was there? Again, this is something that I can't speak for anyone else, As I said before, I know that there was a lot of drama around Zoe's Girl Online series. And I feel like actually that moment in time was quite a cultural shift in when influencers began to lose a little bit of credibility with not only like the fans, but also like the mainstream media, the parents of like the teens that were watching YouTubers at the time. I felt like that was kind of, it wasn't like the start of like a bit of mistrust, but it really sort of bubbled after that. And because of that situation, there were a lot of doubts over, well, are the YouTuber books, all ghostwritten? I can tell you for a fact, as I've already said in this video, I wrote every single word of my book to the point where I actually had a little bit of a mental breakdown and packed my bags and flew to another country and, just trying to write this book. But I was basically having a mental break at the time, but I was absolutely certain that I wanted to write my entire book, and that was never in question. It wasn't even asked, to me like, do you want us to help you write it? Everyone knew I was going to do it myself. Other people, I don't know how much help they had. I can't speak for them, and that wouldn't be fair. I don't think there's anything wrong with getting a bit of assistance. I do think it's important to have, a bit of transparency, a little bit of honesty. I think at the time, YouTubers really overlooked how important it was to have that honesty and how much of a connection that would bring, just being open and honest the whole time. I've made some mistakes in my career as a YouTuber. I've had some backlash for being honest, a little bit too honest sometimes. I've also felt like it's become very fair game in the past to critique a lot of the things that I do based off of the fact that I've always been so critical of others in the past. Like, it's open season. But you know what? I wouldn't change a thing. Ultimately, I'm proud of the fact that I've always been honest. I've been honest about my mistakes. I've been honest about my opinions of other people's mistakes and things like that. But I have also become a bit kinder and I've mellowed out a bit in my 30s. And I think ultimately, so long as you are doing things for good, you're not doing things with the intention of taking advantage emotionally or financially, what have you. And if you make a mistake, you own up to it and you show accountability and you show how you're moving on from those things and learning, I don't think there's any problem with that. I really don't. How many copies did your book sell? Okay, all right. Said I was going to be honest. So I can officially brag and say that I am not only a singer, songwriter, YouTuber, influencer, author, I'm also a Sunday Times bestseller. All you have to do to be a Sunday Times bestseller, you don't have to be the #1 in the Sunday Times book chart, which is the UK's biggest book chart thing. It's the one that everyone credits in the UK. You have to be in the top 10. Basically, you have to get in the top 10 books sold that week. My book debuted at #4 in the Sunday Times book bestsellers list. And I think it was reported the first week it sold something like 1,500. You might say, well, that's not very many. That's a lot of fucking people reading the words that I put in this, that I put my heart into this book. That's a lot of people. The second week, I think it amassed to like 2,300. So I would say like overall, it's probably sold less than like 3,000 copies. You know, back then, would I have been like, oh, I wish it sold more? Yeah, probably. You know, now, that's pretty fucking cool to me. There are people out there who have wanted to be authors all their life. And that's another thing I don't take lightly either. I didn't grow up wanting to be an author. I was given a very great opportunity to write a book, having never wanted to be an author before in my life. And I think the amount of YouTuber book deals that were coming through did hurt a lot of people. I think it hurt people felt like it hurt their chance of getting their book published because, you know, the book charts being dominated by influencers. And also I acknowledge the fact that I think it felt like quite a kick in the teeth to those who have been writing for years and years and sending their books to publishers and just getting like rejection letters or not even a you know, an acknowledgement of the manuscript. And here we are, you know, waddling along, you know, with our books, you know, in all the bookstores and things like that. There are people out there who, you know, would love to be a published author, let alone sell 3,000 copies of a book. So do I look at it like, you know, oh, didn't sell? Not at all. You know, I was presented a very good opportunity and I made the most of it. I tried to help people with it. So I'm really proud of that. For comparison, I think the week that my book first started, #4, the #1 best-selling book was also by a YouTuber. Goes by the name of Saffron Barker. I don't believe I've ever met Saffron. If I have, I'm sorry, I don't remember. But there was so many influencers and YouTubers by that point. I cannot honestly remember who I met and who I haven't. So I haven't got anything to say about Saffron. I do not know Saffron. I don't even know what her book was about. But I think it sold something like 7,000 in the first week and it was #1. At the time, was I a little bit jealous? Yeah, I'll admit it. Of course I was, you know. Was I bitter? I don't know, maybe. But ultimately, goes back to what I was saying about when I was with my sister in W.H. Smith and she was happy just seeing Zoe on the cover of a magazine. If it makes people happy, where's the harm in that? It's not about comparing yourself to other people. Both of us managed to make a book that people wanted to buy and it made people happy. That's what matters. Can you tell us more about being blacklisted? Okay, right. Ooh, I'm going to think carefully about how I talk about this because it's a tenuous, delicate subject. Everything I talk about from here on out has not been confirmed. It is based on information I have been given and it's based on my personal experience. All of this is alleged and any likeness to any company mentioned from here on out is coincidental. Okay, so I've used the term blacklisted. I can't confirm or deny whether or not I have been blacklisted from the book industry. However, there's a couple of reasons why I will not be publishing another book. There's actually a handful. #1, I don't have the YouTube outreach that I did in 2017. #2, I don't think the sales figures would be that exciting for a publisher moving forward. #3, I don't want to. And #4, there was a situation around my book release where I was very outspoken about my opinions, which may or may not have got back to one of the largest book retailers in the UK. And in order for a publisher, especially in the UK, to want to move forward with publishing your book, they really rely on having a good rapport with this certain bookseller. I'm not going to be naming this bookseller. My book is very closely tied to this bookseller. Okay, so just like the music industry, the book industry has weekly sales charts. So say, for instance, like a chart may run from like a Thursday until the next Wednesday or something like that. And then the sales are collated, and then the chart goes up on like Thursday or Friday, something like that. And then the next week of sales begins. You know, it's like a cycle. I can't recall which day of the week that books are put out on the shelves, you know, for a release date. It's either like a Thursday or Friday, I think. But the week of my release, I think it was a Monday or Tuesday, I started seeing tweets from some of you guys who were very excited because they were able to buy my book on the shelves from this book retailer. This is obviously a couple of days before the book's supposed to be released. Now, in my head, I start panicking. I'm on a train, I think, when I start seeing these tweets. I made a bit of a silly move. In my head back then, if my book goes through the cash register on a Tuesday, that's gonna, you know, it's gonna mess with the sales figures. And I cared a little bit about the charts, I'll be honest, you know. There'd been talk about, you know, the book charting and things like that, and we put a lot of work into marketing and things like that, so I wanted it to do well. In my head, the book being out on shelves a couple of days early was gonna impede that, because in my head, the book was gonna, you know, those sales were gonna be part of the week before. I still can't wrap my head around whether or not that would actually be the case. In my head, that makes sense. You know, I can't see how it would count towards the next week if the charts have already stopped between people being able to buy my book early and the next week beginning. So I panic and I'm angry, and you know, what I should have done was I should have sent a message to my publisher straight away. I should have sent an email or called them and asked, what the fuck's going on? Instead, I take to social media. I start tagging the book retailer. I start being quite angry on social media. No, I wouldn't say I was being like disparaging. I was emotional, right? By the end of that train journey into London, I think because I was living in Brighton at the time, by the end of that train journey, I found out that my tweets had already caused quite the ruckus with some of the, you know, head office or what have you, the headquarters of this book retailer. They were not happy with the fact that I was, at the week of the release of my book, being quite loud about this. My publisher, and namely my editor, who I've been working very closely with, you know, throughout the whole journey, was very panicked, because it's not just my book that gets affected. If their relationship with this massive book retailer is affected through me being so mouthy, that's going to potentially impede sales of all of their future books, because this book retailer might now look at my publisher and have negative feelings, you know, because, you know, one of your authors is being a dick. I don't know. I fight back a bit. My publisher were like, please take down these posts. Please take down these fucking posts. They didn't swear. I'm embellishing and I shouldn't. I do delete them, but I am still very, very angry. I find out throughout that day, this is a common practice with this certain retailer. I find this out through independent sources. This is not confirmed by the retailer at all, and probably still wouldn't be in any case. Concept of an embargo, specifically in the UK book industry, is unless you are a huge author, such as, you know, the She-Devil, unless you are a huge author, when this retailer gets your book, regardless of what day it's supposed to come out, they'll put it out on the shelves. This is what I have been told. I thought at the time, and I'll be honest, I still think that's very disrespectful. But, you know, I guess why should any retailer care? You know, a small fry, you know, why would they care? If they've got it, they want to sell it. I'd put so much on the idea of, like, you know, my launch day, you know, in my head, like, I like things to be meticulously planned. I like it to be like a big event sort of thing, you know? I felt like that had been a little bit ruined. I felt like it's sort of been like, you know, the release been like filtered out slightly. It made me sad. It made me angry. So I was a little bit emotional. Emma doesn't make good choices sometimes, even though I did delete all those posts very quickly. In my opinion, and this is my opinion only, I have on record via email, via my agent and my editor working for my publisher, they disagree with me on this. So I want to make that very clear. They do not agree with my opinions on this. I still have my opinions, which I'm entitled to. I believe that my tweets, even though I delete them very quickly, I believe that negative feelings were harbored from this retailer because of that. I have been informed numerous times by various people who have worked for this retailer, who went into the stores of this giant book retailer. None of this is confirmed. As you can tell, I'm trying to be very, you know, vague about this because they are a very, 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 very big retailer. I was told by a couple of you guys that during the week of my release and the week after, and sometimes the week after that, some of you guys went into those stores and asked where they could get my book because they couldn't find it on the shelves. And they were told by the employees that they were told to keep my book under the desks, not out on the shelves. I can't confirm those claims. You know, I don't want to get sued. Can you tell? I've also been told by people that worked for that retailer that they were told to keep them under the shelves of the tills, and that once the first week was complete, once that first week of, you know, it being out on shelves very, very briefly, like some stores had like 1 or 2 out on shelves allegedly, even though they were sent a lot of copies allegedly. I have been told by some people who worked there that after that first week, most of those books, if not all of them they had in store, were sent back to not the publisher, but basically like the factories that these like publishers and manufacturers use, prematurely sent back for pulping. If you don't know what pulping is, basically fuck ton of trees get used to write books. You know, you think about how many, you know, books are out there on shelves. A lot of paper, right? So they actually reuse paper. The pulping is a process where books are sent back to factories, and they are basically all the sleeves are all like stripped off, and the book itself, so all the paper, is chucked into a great big machine filled with, I don't know if it's like acid or just water or something like that, and it's pulped. So imagine like just getting a book really, really, really wet and turning it to like mush, right? It's then reused, I believe, or at least I hope it is, and that's pulping. A lot of books are manufactured en masse in the first few weeks with the knowledge that a lot of them will not be sold and they will be returned for pulping. This process usually happens, you know, within like, I don't know, like, I couldn't even tell you, but I'm going to guess like after the first few weeks or maybe a couple of months. I have been told by some of you that it was instructed very prematurely compared to other books that this retailer was going to be sending pretty much all but maybe 1 or 2, if not all of them, from their stores back for pulping. Again, I don't have that confirmed. You know, it's just a rumor, everybody. I don't know. This is all speculation, okay? And that really broke my heart. But, you know, sometimes, you know, negativity, it runs deep, you know? You don't fuck with the giants, as it were. Ultimately, you know, I sold what I was going to sell. I did a book tour, you know, I signed a lot of books. I sold 1,500, then it went to like 2,300. That's a lot. You know, did it stop the book selling like millions of copies? No, of course it didn't, if it happened at all. But I was very, very sad to hear those accounts. I actually made a video not too long after my book came out, and I believe it was on my second channel. And I initially called it "Why My Book Flopped," which was a horrible title for it, but clickbait, right? And I remember that really upset my publisher and my agent. They were upset and angry, and rightly so. And you know, I do regret calling it that, and I do regret still being very emotional about that at the time. If it did happen, I stand by what I said, by which I mean it fucking sucks, but I was stepping into a world I knew nothing about. I still don't know anything about the book industry, you know? But if those negative feelings still exist, if I was to try and work with a publisher in the UK, and if those rumors are true, and any publisher gets hold of that, then they're going to go, well, we can't publish your book because, you know, the place that sells the most books, most of our books, fucking hates you, allegedly. So that's why I've used the term blacklisted in the past. You know, it might be incorrect, but if I was to ever write another book, which I wouldn't, you know, it's not on the cards right now at least, it would probably be self-published. That was a very long story, so thanks for sticking around. But it leads me on to the final question that I'm gonna answer in this video. If you were to write a book now, what would it be? I wouldn't write another advice book, not because I think I fucking nailed it in the first place, but because I think, you know, what do any of us know? You know, did I have something to say back then? Yeah, sure, I had lots to fucking say. I got to write about my life, you know, even though I was only 25. I was like 24, 25 when I started writing that. What we, babe? What we, bubba? You know? But in terms of advice, I think I'll stick to answering on live streams and answering in these videos and things like that. And I'm sure my advice that I gave in this book, I'm sure I don't stand by all of it now. And that's not because I was full of shit, but that's because between 25 and 34, you change a hell of a lot. I did have an idea for another book about 5 or 6 years ago, but even if I did manage to write it and self-publish it back then, it would be outdated now. It was going to be called Dislike, and it was the idea, it was basically, I wanted to write a book about the growing negativity online and how it's, you know, just it's got so out of hand. You know, it would have talked about the starting of the internet and social media, trolling, things like that, and how anonymity and, you know, the rise of, you know, celebrity interference, you know, people buying social media websites and things like that, which didn't even happen when I had the idea. Basically going to be a book about, you know, how, you know, negativity online, you know, just creeps in and how it affects our daily lives. Like I said, it's going to be called Dislike. But I moved on from that idea, and I'm very glad I did, because like I said, even if I did write it, if I wrote it today, it would be outdated in a year, because the social media changes all the fucking time. I don't think TikTok was even really I don't think it was even a thing when I had that idea. And now I spend all day scrolling on fucking TikTok, you know, just seeing negative stuff all the time. So I don't think I would write a book now. It's just not my realm. You know, I know my place now. You know, I have no regrets, but I think I've done my time. Oh, I did say, didn't I, earlier on the video, I was going to talk about why there's only a hardback version unless you live in Australia. Australia, they really like publishing things in paperback first. But in the UK, they like to publish hardback first, and it's usually about 15 quid. You know, 15.99 for the first few months. So basically, you know, it looks fancier, it's nicer, so the first wave, people spend more money. That's my opinion on it. And then if the book does well, if it has legs, you know, if it's successful and you don't fucking mouth off about, you know, book retailers all the time, you know, in about a year or so, you get the option, they call it, for a paperback version. So that gets sold in, you know, same like bookstores, but mostly places like airports, things like that. And that was part of my deal, basically. Most of the deal was about this, and then there was going to be like a little follow-up of just a paperback version. And when the paperback version was published, then I had received like the lesser amount that was on top of, you know, what I got for this, which I can't legally say, of course. But I do recall that there was the option in that contract, which I think I'd be allowed to say, where basically a publisher has a choice whether or not to publish the paperback or give you the financial equivalent. And I caused so much damage, I believe, that they pretty much off the back of me ranting and making that video talking about why my book flopped, they said, we're not moving forward with the paperback. So, oh my goodness, what a mouthy little cow. So that's why you can't get this in paperback. And, you know, you struggle to find this anywhere now. So, you know, if you've got a copy, hold on to it, you know, if you want to become a fucking megastar. I'm still very proud that I wrote this and that I wrote all of it. You know, it's cool. But that's my story about writing a YouTuber book. You know, God. This has been a long video, a really long video. Thank you for sticking around if you're still here. I have something to show you, to reward you for being here. So a few years back, you could say around 2013, I wrote a little song. It was based on a social media website that I didn't like very much. And I jokingly like to say that, you know, you're welcome, I killed it, because I wrote a bit of a negative little jingle about it. And people reference it a lot. It's still, I think, my most viewed video, which, you know, it's whatever, I suppose. But, you know, recently there's been a rise in something on the internet that I really don't like. The slop of AI that really just pisses me off. It's everywhere, you know. People believe a lot of fake stuff out there these days. People's likenesses are being used, and most of the internet it's just dead internet theory now. It's garbage, isn't it? So I say, if I really did harness the power to kill Google+, if I have that power, why don't I use it for good and kill off AI slop? So the other day, I bought something. What do you say we do it one more time? How about I use my power for good? You'll have to wait for that. I'll see you next time. Until then, guys, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for sending in your questions. And as always, I shall catch you later.